Okay, so this is going to be a different kind of video. Whew. What's going on, everybody? I'm Aunt Pruitt. Hope y'all are doing well. Unbelievable as always. It is almost the end of the week, and it happens to be the end of the month of February. This is going to be a different video, a little bit of a different setup, different lighting. I'm currently in the middle of trying to do some acoustic foam up on my walls to try to make it sound a little bit better in here. So it's a work in progress. Bear with me. But anyway, on to the video. So this week is the last week in February. February is Black History Month in the U.S. And I typically don't get into all of that far as sharing my thoughts on Black History Month and this and that and whatnot. Everybody that I'm close to knows how I feel and where I stand on all of that stuff with our U.S. history. But I felt the need to do a video about it and just say some brief words to share my thoughts and hopefully give a little bit of good cheer and give a little bit of insight. You know, just do whatever a little bit that I can to help take this world to the next level, if you will, and be a better place, not full of so much hate and bigotry and racism. Being here in the South U.S. as a black man, I have experienced a whole lot of just unbelievable racism. Well, I shouldn't say a whole lot, but one experience of racism is too much. But I've had my fair share, but I've also had my fair share of great success and relationships with people that were Caucasian. And I'm so grateful for those relationships. I was having a discussion with a friend of mine, white guy, and it just, he started talking about a movie that he saw and how his eyes were opened a little bit more because he grew up here in the South and he had been essentially naive to some of the things that people of color has dealt with here in the U.S. In the past, as well as what they're dealing with today. You know, it's racism is real and it hasn't gone anywhere. I hope it goes away tomorrow, but it probably won't. But in that discussion, I had to bring up a conversation that I had with my late grandfather, and I'll never ever forget this little discussion, and I wanted to share it with you all. I was in high school. I think I was in the 10th grade or the 11th grade. It was one of those years. I think it was the 11th grade. But I was in high school and hanging out at my grandparents' house and hanging out with my grandfather. Long story short, he helped me with learning how to work on cars and things like that because he was a mechanic. So I spent a lot of time with him just figuring out how to do things on cars. And I think my car was broken down at the time and we were working on it and fixing it. Okay. Somehow we started talking about what it was like for him growing up in the 30s and 40s, 50s and 60s and 70s, you know, and it's a different world right now versus what it was back then. And so we started talking about the 60s, okay? And when we talked about it, we brought up civil rights and all of the civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King in particular. And when Martin Luther King was assassinated, you know, that was big news and it went all across the airways. There were no internet, anything like that, but it was big news that shook up the country, shook up the world. When he found out about it, he was at his job as a mechanic working on a car or whatever. He comes home to my grandmother and he says he remembers walking into the house and seeing her cooking and whatnot. And he wanted to bring up the news about Dr. Martin Luther King. And he brought it up by saying, they finally got him. Now I want y'all to think about that. This man walks into the home and wanted to share the news about a tragedy for Dr. Martin Luther King. He doesn't come in and greets his wife and says, "Did you hear about Dr. King?" Or, "Oh my goodness, Dr. King was assassinated today." He says, "They finally got him." That conversation stuck with me because I could never relate to what he and my grandmother lived with, let alone I could never relate to what my mother and my father lived with back in the 70s and whatnot. Granted, everybody was well liked, from my understanding, by any and everybody in the community. But there was a slight difference when it came to dealing with racism as a black person back then, especially here in the southern states of South Carolina for this particular story. I can remember hanging out with my grandmother. She used to clean offices and houses for work. And we used to go to these little office buildings and watch her clean up and whatnot and do her thing. And we just sort of played, me and my siblings and cousins and whatnot. We just sort of played while she cleaned. But I can remember the interactions that my grandmother would have with the people that ran those offices, or just white people in general. And every time she spoke to those folks, I used to think, she sounds like she's afraid. And it never really clicked until as I got a little bit older, but it was a different time. There were times when people of color were walking the streets and they were pretty much afraid what would happen to them if they got caught or if they got seen by a white person. That's not something that I ever even thought about until just dealing with this stuff that we're seeing here in these last 7 or 8 years in the country. It's getting pretty bad, and I really wish it would go away. But yeah, just hanging out with my grandparents and listening to stories like that, I'll never ever forget that stuff, and I'll never take for granted the opportunity that I have as a man of color here in the U.S. to be able to do what I want and enjoy doing what I do and do it freely. I don't catch a lot of grief or hell or anything like that from anybody out there most of the time. Every now and then I get a few trolls, but I'm not dealing with a lot of racism as much as they were dealing with it, and nowhere near on the scale of racism that they had to deal with. Anyway, I just wanted to share that story and just give you folks something to think about and see where we are now today in 2019 versus 1965 and 67 or anything like that when it comes to dealing with the world of race here in the U.S. Please take some time to reflect on some of the things that you've seen, witnessed, or even experienced. Please take a minute to try to educate someone and help them understand what it is that you have dealt with if you're someone of color, what it is that you have seen, what it is that you have read. And I think the more that we can spread this information around, maybe people will start to come around and understand it more, embrace it more, and we can start to eradicate this serious issue of race and racism that's here in this country. I really didn't know how to do this video, but I knew I needed to get it off my chest and get it out there into the open. I know this isn't the type of video my channel is normally known for. I'm not going to apologize for that. Something had to be said, and I'm just trying to do my own little small part with it. I hope the rest of your day is going well or goes well, and I hope you all continue to have great success with all of your creative endeavors. And even better, I hope you all continue to get out there and spread good cheer and good love for everybody out there. Man, woman, black, white, whatever. It all starts with us. Y'all take care, and I'll catch y'all on the next video.